So we talked a little bit about sample size and what would constitute an adequate sample size, and we know that we have diminishing returns when it comes to sample size. When we have a population and we want to have a representative sample, it's going to be close to wanting about 400, and actually you see down here we want about 350 responses in survey research. So we want a sample size of about 350 to 400 for survey research. That's the kind of sample size we need. When we're talking about experimental research and you're looking at, let's say, comparing the outcomes for two different groups in experimental research, you need about 60 people, because you need about 30 people in each group of your experiment. You need about 60 people total. When it comes to correlational research, one general rule of thumb is needing about 50 cases in order to do correlational research. Here's one example of a sample size calculator. It's one that I use. If I can turn the pen off, there we go. Sample size calculator. Let me show you what that looks like from Creative Research Systems. Sample size calculator. And you can just Google sample size calculator to get one that you can use. This asks you right here, it's an integrated interface. What confidence level do you want? So how accurate do you want to be? 95% confidence level is the general rule of thumb. The confidence interval is plus or minus 5%, so I put a 5 in there. That's what I want. I can determine that. And I have to know what my population size is in order to select the sample size. And so remember, I mentioned that typically, let's say, incoming new freshmen to the college is typically in a fall about 1,200 people. So if I want to run a survey of those new students coming in, let's say I'm still trying to assess the effectiveness of my orientation session, and the people who go to orientation are those first-time freshmen. I want to survey them. I'm going to calculate, just by pressing calculate, I need a sample size of 291 in order to be representative of that population of 1,200 students. For another survey that we do is a student satisfaction survey, and that's of all currently enrolled students. My population for that is all currently enrolled students, let's say 5,400 students. I want the same confidence level, the same confidence interval. I press calculate. In order to be representative of that population, all currently enrolled students, I need to have 359 people in my survey. Complete my survey. For the attitude and awareness survey of the community, I'm looking at the service area of the college, looking at nearly 200,000 people in the population. Look, I only need 383 people to complete the survey in order to be representative of that population. Sometimes that's how I calculate the sample size that I need. What would happen though if I don't get quite that many, that 383, for my confidence level of 95% and my confidence interval of 5%? Let's say I only get 350 people to answer this community survey. I can find out what the confidence interval is by knowing the size of the sample and the size of the population. So I know the confidence level that I want is 95%. My sample size, let's say I only got 350 to answer that community survey. And I know that my population is 198,000. Percentage at 50%, calculate. This is above the 5% confidence interval that is standard for statistical research. And so what this is telling you is that you're not as confident that the sample that you got represents the population. Let's look back again at looking at enrolled college students at my college. 3,400 students. I need 350 of them to answer the survey. Or, excuse me, 359 of them. Let's say I get 400 of them to answer the survey. My confidence interval is even better. 5% or less. My margin of error is plus or minus 4.72%, and that means I am more confident, I can be more confident that my sample represents the population. It's a smaller margin of error than the rule of thumb standard 5%. So this is just a publicly available sample size calculator that I like to use, and you can find these on the internet just by Googling sample size calculator. Let's go back to our chart. That was the sample size calculator. Okay, when it comes to picking the people in our sample, we can look at different time dimensions as well. And in cross-sectional studies, that's just a one point in time. Select the sample. You are studying that sample or those individuals at one point in time. It's the most common type of study in social sciences, but the disadvantage of a cross-sectional study is that it only captures a snapshot of a process. Because it's a snapshot, it's one period in time. When you look at longitudinal studies, you're looking at individuals over time, or groups of individuals over time. That's what longitudinal means. So with longitude, this is a snapshot, cross-sectional. One point in time. With longitudinal, we're looking over time. And this is where you'll find trend studies. And a longitudinal study can be multiple cross-sectional studies. So when we look at trends over time, looking like, let's say, enrollment over time, fall enrollment over time, that could be considered a trend study. Several snapshots. We could look at panel studies. A panel study is looking at the same individuals. It follows the same individuals over time. So let's say we wanted to study critical thinking of students that come into our colleges at the freshman level, and we pick a sample of freshmen to study over time. We want it to be representative, so let's say we pick 350 freshmen, and we're going to measure their critical thinking skills with, let's say, the critical thinking CAP test. And then before they graduate from our college, we are going to take a look at the exact same 350 people when they're getting ready to graduate. And we're going to measure their critical thinking skills again with the CAP test. That is considered a panel study. Did their critical thinking skills improve over time? Looking at those exact same 350 people. This ends this part of the module's presentation. Please move on to review the next part